Did you know that 90% of Americans who own a home want to improve their outdoor spaces, but are hindered by factors such as cost, time, lack of skill or knowledge, or uncertainty about their return on investment? Because of that, they often settle for something far less. In this video, we're going to simplify this problem by breaking it down to 7 simple steps for you to follow. These steps will help you overcome those obstacles and help you realize the outdoor space that you've been dreaming of. Additionally, later in this video, we're going to be providing you tips to how to color render a landscape design drawing. This is Zach from Garden Theory. Now let's go on to our first step. So one of the first problems that people have is that they start planting too early in the process. A lot of times you'll see, especially with new neighborhoods, contractors or homeowners will plant trees and shrubs far too close to the house and not properly spaced to frame your house from a street side view. So our solution for that problem is to first start off with a family needs analysis and a site survey. So those might sound like scary words, but it's very simple. For your family needs analysis, this is just going to be a simple list, so just grab a piece of paper and with you and whoever else is living in this home, write down everything you want in an outdoor space. Do you want an outdoor kitchen? Do you want a trampoline? Do you want a lawn for kids to play in? Write down all the things that you would want in your outdoor space, as well as different things that you like, such as the colors of flowers. Do you want to use native plants? Do you like grasses? Things that you don't like. Write all those things down, and this will help you later down the line to help you visualize your space. And the site survey is our next step, which we're going to do some measuring. So either use a tape measure or a measuring wheel, which you can find at Lowe's or Home Depot. First, measure out the perimeter of your house from the outside so you know how long all your walls are, as well as your property boundaries. But if you don't have an easy way to measure things, a cheat sheet that you can use for a homeowner is to use Google Earth or Google Maps and take a screenshot of your home from above, and you can use that to scale out your drawing. And a tip that you can use on Google Earth is you can actually measure things using a program on there. So it's very important to measure things because this is going to help us later when we do our plant selection to be able to know how many plants can we fit in this space. So it's a very important step that you do not want to skip. So one of the things you want to do if you're using Google Earth or another satellite image site is you want to make things a little bit more simple for your landscape design. So I recommend getting some trace paper, or if you're familiar, you can use an online art software and trace out all the outlines of your home and property lines, as well as any other structures like sheds or water features on your site. And this will help you give a little bit more of a simple layout to work with when we're doing our plant selection. And I recommend using a light box to do that if you're doing it by hand. This is the light box that I use, and I've had this since, I think I got it in high school. So having something like this is pretty handy, especially when you're learning how to do artistic things. Because a great way you can learn is by tracing out examples from things that inspire you. And I used this a lot when I was in high school. This is a little side tangent, but when I was first learning how to draw realistic human proportions in an AP art class in high school, this helped me a lot. I would use old magazines and sketch out different things and do little art pieces with it. Got a couple to show y'all. This is all my old art stuff. But over time, I was able to eventually do things like this one, which I'd done from scratch. And from all those practice ones, I was able to finally understand a little bit more of the proportions and scales. And so by using things that inspire you and using those resources online, it can help you to become a better artist as well. But let's go back to our steps. Once you have your base map figured out, you're gonna wanna make a couple copies of this, and we'll explain why later. All right, so far we've listed out some of the needs that we need for this outdoor space. We have prepared a base map. And so now at this point, you might still be feeling a little overwhelmed. Even though you have these resources, this is the tough part, trying to figure out how all these things are going to mesh together into a cohesive and beautiful design. So the first place we're going to start off with is a functional diagram. A great way to start this off is to take one of your copies of your base map and with a pencil or a pen, draw out some arrows of movement within your space, as well as any views from windows, because these are going to be the most important things, is the flow of movement without the space. So draw arrows coming out from the doorways, any views outside the window, all these places where there's going to either be movement or something you'll be looking at from inside the home that you want to make sure that we're not obscuring or anything. Or if there is anything that you want to be more private, draw a zigzag line. Now that you have these arrows in line and any screening areas that you want to keep private, just draw out loose shapes of where you want things. So an easy place to start off would be if you want any lawn or a patio or a deck or an outdoor kitchen space. Roughly circle the area where you want that. Doesn't have to be exact. We're not exactly putting out the dimensions of it yet, but just where you want things. And make big circles around them, roughly where the areas you want, as well as any flower beds, any garden spaces, any water features, anything extra that you want to add to your space. So just start drawing all these little areas, and this will help us with our design. And now you should have something that might look a little rough right now. There might be scribbles everywhere and notes, but hopefully you have a decent idea of where you want things to go. So now we need to figure out how are we going to fit all these pieces of this jigsaw puzzle together. Now there's many different approaches that you can take with form compositions. There are curvilinear designs, and I'll show a few examples while I'm talking, but those ones are going to be using circles as their lines. Note for this one is we're not making wavy lines. It's not very good design. I have a good example up here on my wall. So this one has the landscape as a curvilinear design. So you see, we're going to want big arc, and we want our circles when they connect to hardscapes or the home to end at a 90-degree angle. So they come off of it, and then they have all these circles. See, that's a circle, so they're all repeating circles that intertwine with each other. Rectangular design, everything's going to have 90-degree angles. So everything's going to be squared off, and that's how rectangular design works. I'll show again a few examples on screen, but everything's going to be straight lines, 90-degree angles. And then there's angulinear form composition, which is going to be using 30, 60, and 90-degree angles. But that one's probably a little bit more of a wacky design. It can work well in narrow spaces. And then there is concentric design, which all of your lines are going to point to a single spot, which that really only works if you have something of a very important focal point that you want everything to point towards. So now I want you to pick a design that you want to use, either curvilinear or rectangular or one of the other ones. And so once you have that figured out, we're going to go back to that functional design. I recommend using some trace paper for maybe your first go. Put the trace paper on top, use that light box, that's going to help you a lot. But start putting all those lines onto those rough shapes that you put down. And if you have things to scale, start kind of measuring out. So when you're doing landscape design, a really good resource that I recommend that you get are some scale rulers. So there's an architect and engineer scale. One essentially zooms in and the other zooms out. But these are great ones to get, especially if you're doing things to scale. Helps make sure everything you're drawing on the page is going to be accurate to what's going to happen in the real world. So I definitely recommend getting these if you want everything to go to scale. Like a good width for sidewalks is 5 feet wide for a decently wide sidewalk. And if you're designing a patio or a deck, a good rule of thumb is for however many people you expect to entertain in this space, use a minimum of 25 square feet per person that you would expect to be on this space at once. And that will help you figure out how much space you need for that patio or deck. So if you're designing a space that needs stairs, a good formula to use, I have two that I'm going to give you. It is 2r plus t equals 26, and this is going to help us figure out how tall our stairs are and how wide the tread will be. So r is the rise and t is the tread. So if we want a rise of 7 inches on these steps, so we do 2 times 7, which is 14, and then we minus that 14 from the 26, which gives us t equals 12. And so now we know that our tread, or our length, is 12 inches, and our descent is 7 inches with each step. And to figure out the total number of steps that you'll need, all you do is take, again, that height, which in this example we used 8 feet, which is 96 inches. Divide that by 7, which is 13.7, and we'll round that up to 14, so that's 14 steps in total for that staircase. So now that we have our design laid out and inked, you may be wondering, is there really a need to color render it? And the answer is yes and no. For a homeowner application, you may not need to color render it. It kind of depends on your circumstance. So if it's just you personally doing this for a project, you're probably fine without color rendering it. But however, if you live in a neighborhood with a homes odor association, you may need to approve any landscape designs or edits that you want to make. So having something that is to a similar professional standard is going to help you when you present your landscape design edits to someone. It helps things look more clean and presentable, as well as having things neatly labeled with all caps and clean lettering. That's going to help you a lot, as well as if you're interested in pursuing this as a career, it's good to practice now with color rendering, which you may not use in all circumstances, but it'll help you improve your artistic skills and be able to learn a new talent. All right, so we're moving on to our next step, plant selection. So this is where a lot of people can make some common mistakes. So I've already mentioned at the very beginning of this video, but a very common mistake that people make is planting things either too close together, too close to their home's foundation, or in a way where it blocks your home from a street view. And so all these different common mistakes can be easily avoided. And so going back to our first step, during your family needs analysis, you probably wrote down a few plants that you like as well as colors. And it's a good idea to stick with the color theme for your home, especially on different sides of your house, because every side of your home is going to have a different microclimate. And a microclimate, all that is very simply, every side of your home is going to be a little different. So a south and west facing face of your house is going to be warmer and drier than the north and east facing sections of your house. And that is because here in the northern hemisphere, the sun rises in the east, arcs across the southern sky, and sets in the west. And so it's always going to be hitting those southern parts of your home. And so that's why those different microclimates exist, as well as any shade from any matured trees on your site. So all these things you want to keep in mind. And I'm always going to recommend that you stick with the spacing that the grower recommends. A lot of times people don't trust the tags, but as a horticulturalist, I am always going to say to trust the tags. So there's a lot of different ways we can go with our plant selection, but let's talk about a few categories. So our first category is going to be an evergreen background. So evergreens like hollies, boxwoods, they are always going to be more of a background plant. They're evergreen, so they're green throughout the year usually, and they help provide that base wall for your foundation of your landscape design beds. And then next is going to be your deciduous framework. So this can be either with trees such as oak and maple trees, but this also goes into shrubs like a deciduous dogwood. And these are going to provide that seasonal interest. They may have some flowers, but it's not necessarily required. But this is going to help provide some framework. They're usually going to be the biggest thing in the design. And then next up is going to be the accent plants. So these are going to be a little bit smaller. They usually help to provide a little bit of color to your design. They're not necessarily the focal point. They're just kind of there to help support and bring some color and some support to whatever color scheme that you're going with. So these can be like your complementary colors to your focal point. And then next up, of course, is the focal point. That's going to be something that draws the most interest. That's going to demand the attention. And usually you want to be a little bit more selective with those focal points. And then the last one is infill, which is usually ground cover or perennials. That usually is the biggest portion of the design, helps to fill in all those little spaces on the outside. Something else you want to keep in mind is what type of plants do you want to use? Do you want to use native plants, which is something I definitely recommend. Sometimes native plants can be a little hard for people to understand at first, but there's a lot of great native plants that we can look into. I'm actually going to do a whole video very soon about different native plants that you can use for landscaping purposes. Another step that we're going to talk about while we're talking about plant selection is called xeriscaping. Xeriscaping is also known as water-wise landscaping. And this is going to help you a lot with long-term maintenance. And so xeriscaping, a bad example is doing all rocks in your landscapes, like rock beds, rocks everywhere. That's probably the worst example, and some people will call that xeriscaping, but that's not helpful at all. It just heats up your soils and heats up the area around your house, increasing your energy bills, which the whole purpose of landscape design is to reduce maintenance as well as reducing energy costs to your home. Now, good examples of xeriscaping is using native plants, using water-wise irrigation, using only what you need. Drip irrigation is usually the best type of irrigation to use. We're also going to be doing a future video on just xeriscaping in the future. So if those topics sound interesting to you, feel free to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you can be notified that in the future. So I hope these steps helped you to feel a little bit more confident when approaching landscape design projects for your own home. Again, follow these steps. Don't skip any of these steps because every step is as important as the next. And hopefully this will help you to be able to conquer those fears. And I know that making changes to your landscape will improve your home value if you do it right. It's going to help to increase your curb appeal, make your space more beautiful. Not only that, having a better landscape that you love and care for also helps to reduce your own stress and anxiety levels. So it's a win-win on both sides. And if you want to learn more about either native plants or landscape design tips, watch some of our previous videos. I'll have them above me. Tell me what you think of them. But with that, I think that's going to be the end of this episode. Thank you all so much for watching, and go improve your landscapes.